Hello guys, welcome to another video. On this one I'm going to do a final update for my Pathfinder gas grenade build, as we're getting to the end of the second weekend for Path of Exile 2's 0.3 update, and I've had a ton of fun playing this build. I feel like I've pushed it almost to its limit. It's getting there. I could invest a lot more currency and get some final crazy upgrades for the build, but I feel like it's pretty much there in terms of what it can do. It can, can clear everything in the game pretty much. And it has its strengths and it has its weaknesses, and this video I'm going to kind of go over where I'm at in the game right now, what I ended up doing on the passive tree and my gear and things like that. So, compared to the last update, I have had a lot of gear upgrades, so let's actually start off with the gear upgrades. First of all, the crossbow is the same as the last update that I did. I have tried to craft a better crossbow than this several times actually, and several times I just completely failed. Lots of currency wasted trying to get a better crossbow than this, and in the end this one just kind of ended up being better than everything I came up with, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. Getting that last modifier on the item is actually really difficult, and getting lucky with it is hard. When I tried to go for crafting this again, instead I had a little bit of a different method going on. I wanted to try and desecrate a tier 2 or tier 1 flat added damage, but it just wasn't happening, right? I failed on that many times in a row, so that was a ton of currency wasted, but that's how it goes sometimes. So the crossbow is still the same. This crossbow is plenty enough to do everything in the game anyway, so that is what it is. The helmet is still the same, haven't changed that at all. I do have a very good body armor now. This one I got really lucky with. I actually purchased this with double tier 1 prefix, and I think it had the lightning res on there, and then I got the double resistance on there, the chaos and cold from 2 greater exalts, which is kind of crazy, and the tier 3% evasion and energy shield there came from desecration. That was an ancient rib with an omen of abyssal echoes there, so you can re-roll it twice, so that's quite a nice body armor upgrade there. And then the other big upgrades that I've got into the build are these rings, especially this one here. I'll quickly go through how to craft this ring. Some people may be interested in how to craft this. This is actually fairly straightforward to craft, and it's actually not that expensive until the very end, so you can kind of pull out of the craft if something goes wrong. So you want to begin with tier 1 cold or fire damage on a magic ring. So not lightning, because lightning is exceptionally expensive, because that's kind of the damage that everyone wants to go for because it has the highest top end. But you want to start with a cold or fire tier 1 roll on a magic ring, and then on the suffix for that magic ring you want a suffix modifier that you need. So either attributes or resistance, whatever you need on there is fine. Obviously if it's attributes, it mostly can be any attribute, because you can always swap your attributes on the pathing on your tree to make up for something else there. Then you want to use a greater essence for another suffix that you need, either attributes or resistance. So at this point you'll have 1 prefix and 2 suffixes. Then you want to go ahead and use an omen of dextral exaltation along with a greater exalt to add another suffix, so you have 3 suffixes and 1 prefix. Then once you actually have that, and I got a bit lucky here, I actually slammed the dexterity there, which I do need in this build, so that was really nice. And at that point you want to add catalyst quality for the type of attack you want to add to that item. So in this case, at this stage, I added lightning catalyst to it, and then you want to go ahead and use one of these, omen of catalyzing exaltation. And what this does is it's going to consume the catalyst and then provide much more chance to actually add a type of modifier of that catalyst. So in this case it has a higher chance to actually add either lightning damage to attacks or % lightning damage. Both of those are on the prefix, and I got lucky and added a tier 2 lightning damage to attacks here. You can get unlucky. For example, in this ring I did the exact same method, and on that step I hit maximum mana, but I just decided to go with it for this ring because maximum mana isn't bad. It improves our mana recovery, and then I got the life on the desecration there. But once you actually have that second attack modifier on there, you've got, at this stage of the craft you haven't actually spent too much to get there, right? Now comes the expensive bit. So if you actually get a really good attack modifier on there as a second one, let's say you roll a tier 3 or tier 2 attack, or even a tier 1, and you're really happy with it, now you can fully commit to the ring, and the next part is going to be expensive. You want to go ahead and get yourself an ancient collarbone, which these are pretty expensive, I believe at the moment they're like 4.5 divines each. So you want one of these, and you also want an Omen of Abyssal Echoes, and then obviously you just put that into the Well of Souls, and hopefully you get lucky for that third added attack damage there, and that's how you go about getting one of those rings. But as I said, this other ring that I have here is... I probably would have gone from scratch again and started crafting it again if it wasn't for the fact that this actually had Chaos Resistance on it, and I was happy with the rest of the item, so I just left it. So this is totally fine. And then for my belt and boots, these are probably the worst items I have in the build, but they're mostly just there to fix some holes in the build. In this case, both of these are there just for the resistances, right? I need the fire res, the lightning res. In this one, I've got a lot of chaos res here as well. I'm actually close to chaos res cap on this build now, so that's why I'm not using a chaos resistant soul core in these boots here, which is what I would be doing if I didn't get lucky on the chaos resistance rolls on the exalts. And these ones just have some deflection there as well. I haven't got deflection modifiers anywhere else in the build, anywhere on the tree or anything like that. So this isn't really doing much. You can actually see here on the deflection chance there is 26% chance of what we got. It's not really anything. It's not very reliable or particularly useful, but it is what it is. And then the last thing is the amulet there, which I actually grabbed this. I saw this on the trade site. It had the gem levels and it had intelligence and cold resistance, and I actually picked that up. I think it cost me a couple of divines. I want to say 2 divines. And then it had some pretty terrible prefix modifiers. So what I did was I replaced one of those prefix modifiers with the global defenses mod. That is an essence mod, and obviously it had to remove a prefix because it had 6 affixes on the item. And then I used one of the omens. I can't remember which one it's called now. It's the prefix omen for Abyss. It is this one here, Omen of Sinistral Necromancy, which makes it so that your next desecration attempt will only add prefix modifiers. Now, some people don't actually know that desecration modifiers, if an item has full affixes, so if it has 6 modifiers, you'll actually remove a modifier automatically by trying to desecrate an item. So this is actually something that's kind of hidden away in the tooltip here. But you can see here, if modifiers are full, then a random modifier is also removed. And that means that if you have an item with 6 affixes, you don't have to waste your money on going for, one of the annulment omens here, which are really expensive, right? To be able to then add your desecrated modifier. You can instead just use one of these omens of Sinistral or Dextral, depending on, prefix or suffix. Then next time you actually use one of those, ancient items or preserved on the item, it will actually remove that particular type of affix. So in that case, I actually, got this desecration modifier for increased evasion rating from equipped body armor, which isn't the greatest, but it is what it is. But the rest of the modifiers, everything on here is useful at least. Even if it's such a low roll of increased evasion, it's still useful to the build. And then we have Overwhelming Strike anointed on here, which is some increased crit chance and increased critical damage bonus. That would be a good segue to discuss kind of what I'm doing with the build in terms of the crit swap. I talked about how I was going to swap over to crit. The problem with the crit setup that I came up with for this build is that I wouldn't say it's squishy, but it's significantly weaker defensively compared to the non-crit version, because you kind of sacrifice a bit of defense to get a lot more damage. So I've kind of gone for a bit of a hybrid between the two. And that's because I'm still using my Ancestral Tiara helmet instead of going for the unique item there that applies critical weakness. And I've kind of gone for a bit of a middle ground there. So I'm still keeping some of the nodes from the other setup, but I've still dropped this poison wheel here in order to grab some crit stuff here, and there's some crit scaling. And over here we're also grabbing crit scaling. And then you can actually see, if I actually go over to my skills, I can show you how much crit chance I actually have. Let's have a look. About 25% without critical weakness. So we actually do apply critical weakness with our totem, and once that actually starts to stack up, this number will jump up dramatically. But at 25%, I think this is kind of around the sweet spot for this build, because you don't want to really overinvest into crit chance, because we're a dot-based build, so we can afford to kind of fish for crits, right? We have a bunch of clouds that stack up on top of each other. When we're fighting like a boss or a tanky target, we have a bunch of clouds that stack up on top of each other, and we can afford to continuously spam our gas grenades on top of each other to fish for crits, because when a crit actually does occur, that gas cloud stays there for 9 seconds and continuously inflicts a critical poison every 2 seconds. So I think having a good amount of crit but not too much investment into it is probably the way to go. So that's what I'm doing on this build at the moment, and I think this is kind of a good middle ground. I may update the guide for that, but I think that a lot of cases people kind of want to go one way or the other, so they want to go, you know, more all in on it. And obviously the setup that I put into the guide there for the full crit ends up getting around 50% base crit chance without critical weakness, so it's much more all in on crit. Now let's quickly go over the gems. So I did end up getting a level 20 gem. This was only very recently, actually. I didn't buy a gem. I thought, you know what, I'm going to wait and see, can I actually find my own gem? Only very recently that I found a level 20 gem in a Simulacrum. That may actually be in the footage at some point, because I recorded that encounter. That was a tier 3 Simulacrum. So this is the full damage setup that I have at the moment. When I'm mapping, I swap Encroaching Ground there for Elemental Focus. But this is pretty much the same as it was before. Elemental Armament, Arakadi's Lust, Deadly Poison 2, Persistent Ground 3, and Elemental Focus. And then, you know, the swap for mapping there. We've got Withering Presence. We have the Despair setup. This has changed a little bit. I actually found this setup here with the Curse to be quite a lot better. Not just generally in terms of gameplay, but in terms of the current patch, this is a better setup for the Curse. So instead of having a curse that goes off and then we have, you know, increased duration of the curse there, we've got one that just applies the curse on the ground. So we're using curse ground support. This means that we can have 2 areas of curse ground, and they're pretty big areas as well. I can show you that here. The area is quite huge. Like, look how big this is. You may be able to see in the footage when I done the Simulacrum that it covers like the entire Simulacrum area. Like all the monsters are constantly standing in the curse. And this lasts for its full duration, and the way our Cursed Ground works is the monsters don't actually have to be in it the moment it goes off. They can be in it at any time afterwards, and it constantly curses all monsters that are inside that Cursed Ground. So this is really, really nice, and then we just have that with, you know, less cost there, and longer duration, and a bit more Cursed Magnitude. Then we have our Wind Dancer there with, you know, this is like Blind and Maim, mostly a support link there to keep us alive. Ghost Dance and Toxic Domain there. We've got Chaos Mastery in here that I don't think I had before. The way our Toxic Domain is working is you kind of build up damage on the pustule, and you can see that it detonates early after storing this amount here of poison damage. So, you know, this kind of modifier here that we put on it, the long fuse, where it has, you know, a longer detonation time but deals more damage, the detonation time doesn't matter at all if we're able to explode it early, which we are because we deal a ton of damage, right? So adding more gem levels to this just means that its potential is a lot higher, because it deals damage based on this stored poison, and that's how we're getting an extra poison there. And then we have our Dark Effigy, which is there to apply critical weakness. And then lastly, I'll just mention this flask here. I did make a video on this flask, the Blood of the Warrior. This flask is really, really good for energy shield attack builds. If you're kind of energy shield based, whether you're hybrid or CI, this is really good, because most of the time you're not really going to be using your life flask. You may have it, you know, situationally, especially earlier on when you don't have a lot of energy shield, you're not going to want to use this flask. This is much more of a late game thing, a late game addition to the build. But what happens here is you just have this flask up. It doesn't end when unreserved life is filled, so it will last its full duration. In this case, that's 7.5 seconds on this one here, because it has such a high roll in the duration. And then whenever you actually do get hit, you're going to gain 5 rage, and that rage isn't going to deplete because you also have no inherent loss of rage during effect, which means that if you just kind of keep this up all the time, you can slowly and steadily gain towards 30 rage, and then you keep it. And rage is a modifier that just grants more attack damage. So it's 1% more attack damage per stack, up to 30 baseline. That's 30% more attack damage, and this doesn't just apply to melee, it applies to any attack. That includes our gas clouds, and includes the poison that is applied by those gas clouds, because they are based on the attack damage hit of that attack. So this is just a kind of nice flask addition to the build in a slot which typically wasn't really doing much for us at all. There is a little bit of a trade-off going on here, of course, because you can get a life blast with some really nice defensive mods like, you know, removing freeze or removing bleed and things like that, but that is kind of what the charms are there for, right, to remove those really important effects on you. And that is pretty much it overall. I'll leave some footage here at the end with like a full playthrough of, I think it's Xesht Tier 3 that I did, so you can see like exactly what the gameplay is like, because that's like a foot encounter, right? It's almost like a map from the start, and then there's a boss at the end. So I'll leave that going in the background. But this is the final update for that build. I think I might put together a full build guide for the Gas Grenade Pathfinder. I'm not sure when that'll be coming out, but I should have some time to put that together across the next week or so, and then I'll get that out when it's ready. But yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying the build if you're playing it. I hope you're enjoying the league. I know I am. I've had a blast playing this league compared to 0.2. But that's going to be it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. And as always, stay tuned and stay safe.